Emma Carter had spent most of her life believing that if she worked hard enough and loved her family enough, they would eventually love her the same way in return. Growing up, she was always the responsible child. While other teenagers spent weekends with friends, Emma worked part-time jobs to help with household expenses. When her younger brother Ryan got into trouble, their parents would rush to protect him. When Emma achieved something impressive, they would simply nod and move on as if success was expected from her. Over the years, she convinced herself that this was normal. She told herself that every family had flaws. She told herself that her parents loved her even if they rarely showed it. Most importantly, she told herself that being needed was the same thing as being appreciated. By the age of 34, Emma had built a successful marketing company from the ground up. It had not been easy. She had worked long nights, sacrificed relationships, and pushed herself through countless obstacles. While many people her age were enjoying vacations and comfortable lifestyles, Emma spent years investing every spare dollar into her business. Eventually, her hard work paid off. Her company became successful, and for the first time in her life, she felt financially secure. Unfortunately, her family's expectations grew right alongside her success. Whenever her parents needed money for repairs, they called Emma. Whenever Ryan found himself in debt, Emma was expected to help. Whenever there was a family emergency, everyone looked at Emma as though she were a walking bank account. She rarely complained because she loved her family. Even when it hurt, she convinced herself that helping them was the right thing to do. One afternoon, Emma received a phone call from her mother. Her father's 65th birthday was approaching, and the family wanted to do something special. Her mother explained that everyone was busy and no one had time to organize a celebration. As usual, the responsibility fell onto Emma. She listened quietly while her mother listed all the things that needed to be arranged. By the end of the conversation, Emma was essentially planning the entire event herself. Despite feeling slightly frustrated, she agreed. Deep down, she hoped that creating a wonderful celebration might finally bring the family together. She wanted her father to feel appreciated. She wanted everyone to enjoy themselves. Most of all, she wanted one happy memory that wasn't overshadowed by disappointment. Over the next several weeks, Emma carefully organized every detail. She researched restaurants, compared menus, reserved a private dining room, and coordinated schedules. Eventually, she selected one of the most prestigious seafood restaurants in the city. The restaurant was famous for its fresh lobster, elegant atmosphere, and exceptional service. It was expensive, but since everyone had agreed to share the cost, Emma wasn't worried. During a family group call, the subject of expenses briefly came up. Several relatives agreed they would contribute. Ryan casually said everyone should split things fairly. Their mother agreed. Their father seemed pleased with the plan. Hearing this reassured Emma. She had no intention of paying for the entire event herself. She simply wanted to organize it. As the birthday approached, Emma spent even more time preparing. She ordered decorations, arranged a custom cake, and even created a slideshow of family photographs spanning decades. Looking through old pictures stirred mixed emotions. In many photos, Ryan stood proudly in the center while Emma remained somewhere in the background. Still, she smiled as she assembled the presentation. She wanted the evening to be about celebrating her father rather than dwelling on old hurts. Finally, the special day arrived. Emma arrived at the restaurant early to make sure everything was perfect. The private dining room overlooked the waterfront, and golden lights reflected beautifully across the water. Fresh flowers decorated the tables. The staff had prepared everything exactly as requested. Emma felt proud of what she had created. One by one, family members arrived. Her parents appeared delighted when they saw the room. Ryan arrived with his girlfriend and immediately began taking photos for social media. Several cousins joined them along with a few close family friends. Everyone complimented Emma on the arrangements. For a brief moment, she felt genuinely appreciated. The evening began wonderfully. Guests laughed, shared stories, and reminisced about old memories. Emma watched her father smile as he greeted relatives he hadn't seen in years. Seeing his happiness made all her hard work feel worthwhile. As menus were distributed, the waiter explained the restaurant's specialties. The menu featured premium lobster dishes, imported seafood platters, expensive wines, and luxury desserts. Emma noticed several family members exchanging excited glances. Ryan was the first to order. Without hesitation, he selected one of the most expensive lobster combinations available. Then he added premium side dishes and an imported bottle of wine. His girlfriend followed his example. Soon others were doing the same. Emma was slightly surprised by how quickly everyone's orders escalated. Cousins who normally complained about restaurant prices suddenly ordered extravagant meals. Her mother selected luxury seafood options she had never shown interest in before. Even her father ordered one of the premium tasting menus. Emma reminded herself that everyone would be contributing. If people wanted to treat themselves during a special celebration, that was their choice. Throughout dinner, the spending continued. More bottles of wine appeared. Additional appetizers arrived. Guests ordered specialty desserts before even finishing their main courses. Several people joked that they should enjoy everything while they had the chance. At the time, Emma thought nothing of those comments. The atmosphere remained cheerful and she focused on enjoying the celebration. Her father gave a heartfelt speech thanking everyone for attending. He spoke about family, loyalty and support. Emma listened quietly, hoping some of those words might apply to her. She had supported everyone for years. Perhaps tonight would mark a new chapter. Perhaps things were finally changing. As the evening progressed, Emma noticed small details that felt strange. Whenever a waiter mentioned prices, certain family members exchanged knowing smiles. Ryan seemed unusually relaxed despite ordering far more than anyone else. At one point, she overheard him whisper something to his girlfriend, causing both of them to laugh. When Emma approached, the conversation immediately stopped. A faint feeling of discomfort settled in her stomach, but she pushed it aside. She didn't want suspicion to ruin the evening. Eventually, the celebration came to an end. Guests finished their desserts, coffee was served, and the birthday cake was presented. Everyone gathered for photographs. Emma stood beside her father, smiling for the camera. She felt exhausted but satisfied. The event had been a success. Then the waiter entered carrying a black leather folder containing the bill. Emma expected the cost to be divided among the guests as planned. Instead, something strange happened. The room became unusually quiet. Conversations stopped. Several people suddenly found reasons to look away. Ryan checked his phone. His girlfriend stared at her drink. One cousin pretended to read a menu she had already finished an hour earlier. The silence felt heavy and unnatural. Emma looked around the table, confused. The waiter politely placed the folder near the center. No one reached for it. After several awkward seconds, her mother smiled and broke the silence. "Well, Emma," she said casually, "you're paying, right?" Emma blinked in confusion. She thought she had misunderstood. "What do you mean?" she asked. Her mother's smile widened slightly. "Come on, sweetheart, you're the successful one. This isn't a big deal for you." Emma stared at her mother, waiting for someone to laugh and reveal it was a joke. Nobody did. Instead, Ryan leaned back in his chair and shrugged. "Yeah, you make more money than the rest of us combined. It makes sense." Several relatives nodded in agreement. Emma felt her heart sink. "I thought everyone was contributing," she said quietly. Her father avoided eye contact. Her mother sighed dramatically as though Emma were creating a problem. "Do we really have to discuss money during your father's birthday?" she asked. "Don't ruin the evening." The words struck Emma like a slap. Suddenly she understood what was happening. This had not been a misunderstanding. This had been planned. The expensive orders, the confidence, the jokes, the strange smiles, they had all known. Every lobster platter, every bottle of wine, every luxury dessert had been ordered with the assumption that Emma would pay. Her stomach twisted as the realization settled in. She slowly opened the bill and saw the total, nearly $4,000. The number stared back at her like a cruel joke. Around the table, family members waited expectantly. Not one person offered to help. Not one person expressed concern. They simply assumed she would handle everything because that was what she had always done. Emma felt embarrassed, angry, and heartbroken all at once. Yet she also knew causing a public scene would only create more humiliation. The restaurant staff stood nearby. Other guests could easily overhear. Her father's birthday celebration would become remembered for an argument rather than a celebration. Taking a deep breath, Emma reached for her credit card. As she handed it to the waiter, she noticed relief spread across several faces around the table. Ryan even smiled. The transaction took only a few moments, but it felt much longer. When the receipt finally returned, Emma signed it with trembling hands. Nobody thanked her. Nobody apologized. Instead, conversations immediately resumed as if nothing unusual had happened. Family members gathered their belongings and prepared to leave. Her mother kissed her cheek and told her she had done a wonderful job organizing the event. Ryan joked about how amazing the lobster had been. Guests laughed and headed toward the exit. Emma remained seated for a moment after everyone left. The room that had been filled with laughter now felt empty. Looking around at the abandoned plates and half-empty wine glasses, she felt something inside her begin to change. For years, she had ignored small betrayals because she loved her family. For years, she had convinced herself that their behavior wasn't intentional. Tonight had destroyed that illusion. As she sat alone staring at the receipt, a painful truth settled into her heart. The people she loved most had not seen her as a daughter, a sister, or even a family member. They had seen her as someone they could use. And for the first time in her life, Emma wondered what would happen if she stopped letting them. The days following the birthday dinner were some of the most painful Emma Carter had experienced in years. At first, she tried convincing herself that maybe she had overreacted. Perhaps her family had genuinely assumed she wanted to treat everyone. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding somewhere along the way. She desperately searched for an explanation that would make the situation hurt less. Unfortunately, every passing day revealed more evidence that what happened at the restaurant had not been an accident at all. The receipt for nearly $4,000 remained on her kitchen counter as an unwanted reminder. Every time she looked at it, she remembered the silence around the table, the expectation in everyone's eyes, and the casual way her mother had volunteered her money without even asking permission. Emma threw herself into work, hoping business meetings and deadlines would distract her. During the day she managed to focus, but at night the memories returned. She replayed the evening repeatedly, noticing details she had ignored before: the expensive orders, the confident smiles, Ryan's laughter. The way nobody looked surprised when the bill arrived. The more she thought about it, the more impossible it became to believe that everything had happened by chance. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media during a lunch break, Emma noticed a post uploaded by Ryan's girlfriend. The post contained several photographs from the birthday dinner. Most were ordinary pictures of food and family. Then she reached a short video clip recorded before everyone sat down. In the background, Ryan's voice could be heard laughing with two cousins. "Order whatever you want," he said. "Emma's got this covered." The group laughed loudly. One cousin jokingly asked if there was a spending limit. Ryan replied, "Not unless she suddenly stops being the family ATM." Maury laughter followed before the video ended. Emma stared at the screen in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she replayed the clip several times. There it was, proof. Not only had Ryan expected her to pay, but he had openly joked about it before dinner even began. The realization hit her harder than the bill itself. She had spent years helping her brother because she loved him. She had defended him countless times when others criticized his irresponsibility. She had paid off debts he promised to repay but never did. Yet behind her back, he viewed her as nothing more than a source of money. That evening, Emma sat alone in her living room reflecting on the past. As she thought about Ryan's words, old memories resurfaced one after another. She remembered when Ryan failed several college classes and risked losing his enrollment. Their parents had panicked because tuition payments were already overdue. Emma had emptied a large portion of her savings to cover the fees. Ryan promised he would repay her someday. He never did. She remembered when their parents struggled with mortgage payments after making poor financial decisions. Emma stepped in again, writing checks month after month until they stabilized. They thanked her briefly at the time, but soon acted as though the money had appeared from nowhere. She remembered funding family vacations she couldn't even attend because she was too busy working. She remembered buying expensive birthday gifts while receiving little more than greeting cards herself. She remembered being called whenever anyone needed help, and being forgotten whenever they did not. Looking back, a painful pattern became impossible to ignore. Her family rarely contacted her simply to ask how she was doing. Most conversations eventually turned toward money, favors, or responsibilities. Emma had spent years believing she was supporting people she loved. Now she wondered whether she had simply trained them to expect endless sacrifices. Several days later, her mother called. The cheerful tone immediately irritated Emma. "Your father loved the birthday dinner," her mother said. "Everyone is still talking about it." Emma remained silent. Her mother continued chatting as though nothing unusual had happened. Eventually, Emma interrupted. "Why did everyone expect me to pay?" The line became quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" her mother asked. "You know exactly what I mean." Her mother's voice immediately became defensive. "Emma, not this again." "Again," Emma replied. "We never discussed it at all. You just handed me a $4,000 bill and told me it was my responsibility." Her mother sighed dramatically. "You have more money than anyone else. Why are you making such a big issue out of this?" Emma felt anger rising inside her chest. "Because nobody even asked me." "Family shouldn't have to ask," her mother replied. "Family helps family." Emma nearly laughed at the irony. For years she had been helping family. Yet somehow the obligation always flowed in one direction. When the conversation ended, she felt worse than before. Her mother had not apologized. Instead, she had treated Emma's feelings as an inconvenience. A week later, Emma attended a family barbecue hosted by one of her cousins. She considered skipping it but decided she was tired of avoiding conflict. When she arrived, several relatives greeted her warmly. However, the atmosphere changed whenever the restaurant bill came up. Some family members avoided eye contact while others made awkward jokes. Eventually, Emma found herself standing near two older relatives who assumed she was out of earshot. "Poor Emma," one whispered. "They've been doing this to her for years." The other nodded. Everyone knows Ryan takes advantage of her. Emma froze. The conversation lasted only a few seconds before they noticed her nearby and quickly changed subjects. Yet those words echoed in her mind long afterward. Everyone knew. Family members had seen what was happening. Some even felt sorry for her, yet nobody had spoken up, nobody had warned her, nobody had intervened. The betrayal extended beyond her immediate family. It felt as though she had been participating in a game whose rules everyone understood except her. Over the following month, Emma slowly began creating distance. She stopped offering financial help automatically. She stopped volunteering for family responsibilities. She stopped answering every phone call immediately. The reaction was immediate and revealing. Ryan called asking for help with a car loan payment. Emma politely declined. He became irritated within seconds. Their mother called requesting money for home renovations. Emma refused again. Her mother accused her of becoming selfish. Their father needed assistance covering expenses related to a business investment that had gone wrong. Emma said no. Within days, she was receiving messages from multiple relatives questioning her behavior. None of them asked whether she was okay. None of them cared about the hurt she carried. They only cared that the flow of money had stopped. One evening, Ryan appeared unexpectedly at her house. Emma opened the door and immediately recognized the expression on his face. It was the look he always wore when he wanted something. He stepped inside and began talking about financial difficulties. Apparently, he had accumulated credit card debt and needed temporary assistance. Emma listened quietly until he finished, then she simply said no. Ryan stared at her in shock. "What do you mean no?" he asked. "I mean no," Emma replied calmly. "I'm not paying your debt." Ryan laughed as though she were joking. When he realized she was serious, his expression darkened. "After everything this family has done for you?" he asked. Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing. "Everything this family has done for me," she repeated. Ryan rolled his eyes. "You've always acted like a victim." That sentence broke something inside her. Years of frustration surfaced all at once. For the first time in her life, Emma told her brother exactly how she felt. She reminded him about the tuition she paid, the debts she covered, the opportunities she sacrificed, the countless times she rescued him from consequences of his own decisions. Ryan dismissed every example. According to him, she only helped because she wanted praise. According to him, successful people were supposed to support less successful family members. According to him, she was being greedy for keeping money she had earned herself. By the time the argument ended, Emma realized there was no point trying to change his perspective. Ryan genuinely believed he was entitled to her resources. The following weekend, Emma arranged a meeting with her parents. She wanted one final opportunity to express her feelings honestly. Sitting across from them at their dining room table, she described how betrayed she felt. She explained how painful it was to discover Ryan joking about her behind her back. She explained how humiliating the restaurant situation had been. She explained how exhausted she felt after years of carrying responsibilities that belonged to everyone else. When she finished speaking, she waited for understanding. Instead, her mother shook her head. "You're being overly sensitive," she said. Her father remained silent. Emma looked at him hopefully, but he avoided eye contact. Her mother continued speaking. "Your brother struggles more than you do. You should be grateful you're successful enough to help." Emma stared at her parents in disbelief. Even now, after everything, they still couldn't see her pain. They only saw her usefulness. Finally, her father spoke. For a brief moment, Emma hoped he might defend her. Instead, he said, "Sometimes family requires sacrifice." The words landed like a final blow. Emma realized she had been sacrificing for years while everyone else enjoyed the benefits. Nobody had ever asked what sacrifices she needed from them. Nobody had ever offered support when she faced challenges. The expectation was always the same. Emma gives, everyone else receives. As she drove home that night, tears filled her eyes. She wasn't crying because of the money. She wasn't crying because of the lobster dinner. She was crying because she finally understood a truth she had spent years avoiding. Her family did not value her the way she valued them. They loved what she provided. They loved the security she offered. They loved having someone who would solve problems, but they did not truly appreciate the person behind those sacrifices. For several days, she mourned the family she thought she had. Then something unexpected happened. The sadness slowly transformed into clarity. For the first time, Emma stopped asking how she could make her family happy. Instead, she asked a different question. What would make her happy? The answer was surprisingly simple. Peace, respect, boundaries, freedom from endless obligations. She realized that continuing the same pattern would only guarantee more disappointment. Nothing would change unless she changed it herself. Sitting alone in her apartment one quiet evening, Emma opened her banking app and reviewed years of transfers, loans, gifts, and payments. The total amount she had given family members over the years was staggering. Looking at those numbers, she felt neither pride nor regret. She simply felt finished. She closed the app, set her phone aside, and made a decision that would change everything. From that day forward, she would no longer be the family's emergency fund, backup plan, or personal ATM. She would no longer rescue people from consequences they created themselves. She would no longer buy affection with money. Her family had spent years teaching her exactly how they viewed her. Now she was finally ready to believe them. And although none of them realized it yet, the moment Emma stopped funding their lives was the moment their comfortable world began to unravel. After the painful meeting with her parents, Emma Carter did not argue anymore. She did not send angry messages, make dramatic announcements, or try to convince anyone that she had been treated unfairly. She simply stepped back and began living her life differently. For the first time in years, she focused on herself. She spent more time growing her business, reconnecting with old friends, and enjoying the financial freedom she had worked so hard to earn. At first, the silence from her family felt strange. She had become so accustomed to constant requests and demands that the absence of them felt almost unnatural. But it did not last long. Within a few weeks, relatives began reaching out again. The difference was that Emma had learned a powerful new word. No. Every time someone asked for money, she politely declined. Every time someone tried to make their emergency her responsibility, she refused. The reactions were revealing. People who claimed to love her became irritated. Family members who rarely called suddenly accused her of changing. Some relatives suggested she had become arrogant because of her success. Others implied she was abandoning her family. Emma listened to the criticism but remained firm. The more boundaries she established, the more clearly she saw who genuinely cared about her and who only cared about what she could provide. Several months passed. Life became calmer. Emma felt happier than she had in years. Then one afternoon her phone rang. It was her mother. The cheerful tone in her voice immediately made Emma suspicious. Her mother spent several minutes discussing unimportant family news before finally revealing the reason for the call. Ryan had proposed to his longtime girlfriend, Ashley. The family was thrilled. Wedding planning had already begun. Emma congratulated them sincerely. Despite everything that had happened, she genuinely wished them happiness. However, she quickly noticed her mother's excitement had a second purpose. "Ryan wants a beautiful wedding," her mother said. "Something elegant." Emma simply replied, "That sounds nice." Her mother hesitated before continuing. "Well, you know how expensive weddings are." Emma immediately understood where the conversation was heading. "Yes," she replied calmly, "they can be very expensive." There was another pause. "We thought maybe you'd want to help." Emma smiled to herself. Some things never changed. "No," she said politely. Silence filled the line. Her mother sounded genuinely shocked. "What do you mean no?" she asked. Emma repeated herself. "I'm not paying for the wedding." Her mother's tone became colder. "Ryan is your brother. And he's an adult," Emma replied. The conversation ended shortly afterward, but Emma knew the issue was far from over. During the following weeks, pressure arrived from every direction. Ryan called repeatedly. Ashley sent emotional messages. Various relatives contacted her with stories about family loyalty and support. Emma remained consistent. She wished the couple well but refused to finance their wedding. Eventually, the requests seemed to stop. Emma assumed they had accepted her decision. What she did not know was that Ryan and several family members had chosen to ignore her refusal completely. Because Emma had rescued them so many times in the past, they believed she would eventually give in. In their minds, her no was merely temporary. They convinced themselves that once wedding plans became serious enough, she would have no choice but to help. This assumption led them to make a series of expensive decisions. Ryan and Ashley toured luxury venues. They selected one of the most expensive locations in the region, complete with waterfront views, crystal chandeliers, and gourmet catering. They hired premium photographers, designers, musicians, and event planners. Every decision increased the cost. Meanwhile, Emma continued receiving occasional updates from relatives. Family members spoke about the wedding as though everything was progressing perfectly. Whenever Emma reminded them she was not paying for anything, they quickly changed the subject. She found the behavior strange but said nothing. Months passed. The wedding budget continued growing. Deposits were delayed because everyone expected Emma to eventually provide funding. Ryan bragged about the event constantly. Social media posts described a dream wedding unlike anything the family had ever seen. Friends and relatives were impressed. Emma quietly watched from a distance. The most remarkable part was that nobody ever directly asked her to approve any expenses. They simply continued making plans under the assumption that her money would somehow appear. One evening, Emma attended a family dinner hosted by an aunt. During the meal, Conversation naturally shifted toward the wedding. Ryan enthusiastically described imported flowers, luxury transportation, and customized gifts for guests. The estimated cost had reached astonishing levels. Several relatives looked nervous discussing finances, but Ryan remained confident. At one point he glanced toward Emma and smiled. "It's going to be incredible," he said. Emma nodded. "I hope it works out." Ryan seemed surprised by her response. Perhaps he expected reassurance. Instead, she calmly continued eating. A few weeks later, Emma learned something interesting through a cousin. Apparently, Ryan had been telling vendors that financial support from his successful sister would cover any remaining expenses. Some contracts had even been negotiated based on that assumption. Emma could hardly believe it. Not only had she repeatedly refused to pay, but Ryan was actively using her reputation to secure agreements. Rather than confronting him immediately, Emma decided to wait. She wanted to see how far the situation would go. The answer arrived sooner than expected. About 6 weeks before the wedding, Ryan called requesting a family meeting. Emma agreed to attend. When she arrived at her parents' house, she found several relatives gathered around the dining room table. Papers, brochures, and contracts covered every surface. The atmosphere felt tense. Ryan began explaining that certain payments were now due. Deposits needed to be finalized. Vendors required confirmation. Additional expenses had emerged unexpectedly. Eventually, he reached the point everyone had been building toward. "We're going to need your help," he said. Emma remained calm. "I told you months ago that I wasn't paying." Ryan laughed nervously. "Come on, Emma." "No," she replied. The room fell silent. Her mother spoke next. "This isn't funny." Emma looked around the table. "I'm not joking." Ryan's face turned red. "You can't be serious." Emma reached into her purse and removed her phone. For months she had saved every relevant message. One by one she displayed conversations showing exactly what she had said. There were text messages refusing financial support, emails repeating the same position, voice messages explaining that the wedding budget was not her responsibility. The evidence was undeniable. Nobody could honestly claim she had promised anything. The room became increasingly uncomfortable as reality settled in. Ryan stared at the messages in disbelief. His plan depended entirely on the assumption that Emma would eventually surrender. Now he was facing proof that she never intended to do so. "You knew we were planning all of this," he said angrily. "Yes," Emma replied, "and I repeatedly told you not to expect money from me." Her mother tried another approach. "Family doesn't do this to each other." Emma almost laughed. "Family also doesn't hand someone a $4,000 restaurant bill without asking." Nobody responded. The memory of the lobster dinner hung heavily in the room. For the first time, several relatives appeared embarrassed. They remembered exactly what had happened. They remembered how they had sat quietly while Emma paid. Ryan attempted to shift blame. He claimed Emma should have reminded him more forcefully. He argued that she knew how important the wedding was. He insisted she was ruining everything. Emma listened patiently before answering. "You ruined it yourself by planning a wedding you couldn't afford." The words struck harder than any shouting could have. The meeting ended badly. Ryan stormed out. Ashley burst into tears. Emma's mother accused her of being cruel. Her father remained silent, just as he had during countless other conflicts. But this time Emma did not leave feeling guilty. She left feeling free. Over the next several weeks, consequences arrived quickly. Vendors demanded payment. The luxury venue required deposits. Service providers refused to continue without financial guarantees. One by one, expensive arrangements collapsed. The waterfront venue was cancelled. The premium catering package disappeared. The luxury transportation service withdrew. Every dream built on Emma's wallet began crumbling. Family members scrambled to find solutions. Loans were denied. Savings proved insufficient. Relatives who encouraged extravagant spending suddenly became less enthusiastic when asked to contribute. Ryan discovered a painful truth Emma had known for years: people are generous with someone else's money. As wedding plans unraveled, tensions increased throughout the family. Arguments erupted daily. Ashley blamed Ryan for making promises he could not keep. Ryan blamed Emma for refusing to rescue him. Their parents blamed everyone except themselves. Meanwhile, Emma continued living her life. She focused on work, spent time with friends, and refused to participate in the chaos. The contrast was remarkable. While her family raced from one crisis to another, Emma enjoyed a peace she had never experienced before. Eventually, reality forced Ryan and Ashley to redesign the wedding entirely. The extravagant celebration became a modest ceremony held at a small local venue. The guest list shrank significantly. Luxury features disappeared. Expensive decorations were replaced with simple alternatives. It was not the glamorous event Ryan had envisioned, but it was what they could honestly afford. On the wedding day, Emma attended as a guest. Many relatives expected drama, but she behaved graciously. She congratulated the couple, smiled for photographs, and wished them happiness. Several family members seemed confused by her calmness. They expected revenge to involve public humiliation or cruelty. Instead, Emma's revenge had been something much simpler. She allowed people to experience the natural consequences of their own choices. Throughout the reception, she noticed subtle changes in the family dynamic. Relatives who once treated her like an unlimited resource now seemed uncertain how to interact with her. Some avoided eye contact. Others appeared nervous. For years, they had assumed Emma would always solve problems. Now they were learning she had limits. Near the end of the evening, one older aunt approached Emma privately. "You know," the woman said softly, "this is the first time I've ever seen Ryan face consequences." Emma smiled politely. The aunt continued, "Maybe it's long overdue." As Emma drove home that night, she reflected on everything that had happened since the lobster dinner. Months earlier, she had felt humiliated, betrayed, and heartbroken. She had questioned her worth and doubted her decisions. Now she felt stronger. The revenge she achieved was not fueled by anger. It was built on self-respect. She had not destroyed Ryan's wedding. She had simply refused to fund it. She had not punished her family. She had stopped protecting them from the results of their own actions. For years, they believed Emma would always sacrifice herself to keep everyone comfortable. Now they understood something different. The person they treated like an ATM was gone. In her place stood a woman who finally understood her own value, and that realization was more powerful than any revenge money could ever buy. The weeks following Ryan and Ashley's wedding were surprisingly quiet. After months of arguments, accusations, and financial disasters, Emma Carter expected her family to continue attacking her for refusing to pay for the extravagant wedding they had planned. Instead, there was an uneasy silence. Some relatives stopped contacting her altogether. Others only reached out occasionally with short and uncomfortable conversations. For the first time in her adult life, Emma was no longer carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. At first, the silence felt lonely. She had spent so many years being involved in every family problem that the absence of constant phone calls seemed strange. Yet as the days passed, she discovered something unexpected. The silence was peaceful. She woke up each morning without worrying about who needed money. She no longer felt anxiety whenever her phone rang. She could focus on her business, her friendships, and her own future. The freedom felt unfamiliar, but it also felt wonderful. Meanwhile, life became increasingly difficult for the people who had spent years depending on her generosity. Ryan quickly discovered that marriage did not magically solve financial problems. Without Emma's support, he was forced to manage his own expenses for the first time. Credit card bills accumulated. Monthly payments became stressful. Every financial decision suddenly carried consequences. Ashley, who had once dreamed of luxury vacations and expensive purchases, found herself helping Ryan balance budgets and cut unnecessary spending. Their arguments became frequent because neither of them was accustomed to living within their means. Emma occasionally heard updates through relatives, but she resisted the temptation to get involved. She reminded herself that these were not her problems to solve. Her parents faced their own challenges as well. For years they had relied on Emma whenever unexpected expenses appeared. Now they were forced to make careful financial decisions. Home repairs were delayed. Unnecessary purchases were cancelled. For perhaps the first time in decades, they had to live according to their actual income rather than assuming Emma would fill every financial gap. At first they complained bitterly about the situation. They told relatives that Emma had changed. They described her as selfish and ungrateful. Some family members believed their version of events. Others began asking questions. The more people learned about the famous lobster dinner and the failed wedding plans, the more opinions started to shift. Several relatives who had remained silent for years finally began speaking honestly. One cousin admitted that she had always felt uncomfortable watching Emma pay for everything. Another relative confessed that the favoritism toward Ryan had been obvious since childhood. An aunt revealed that she had argued privately with Emma's parents years earlier because she believed they were taking advantage of their daughter. As these conversations spread throughout the family, the narrative slowly changed. For years, Emma had been portrayed as the fortunate and successful daughter who simply had more money than everyone else. Now people were beginning to understand the sacrifices behind that success. They learned about the college debts she had paid. They learned about the mortgage payments she had covered. They learned about the countless emergencies she had solved. Most importantly, they learned how rarely anyone had thanked her. The truth was uncomfortable, but it was impossible to ignore. Several months later, Emma attended a family reunion. It was the first large gathering since Ryan's wedding. She considered skipping it but ultimately decided she would not allow anyone to make her feel unwelcome. When she arrived, she immediately noticed a difference. The atmosphere felt less hostile than before. Some relatives greeted her warmly, others seemed slightly embarrassed. Conversations flowed naturally and nobody asked her for money. It was a small change, but it felt significant. During the event, Emma found herself speaking with relatives she had not seen in years. Many expressed admiration for the business she had built. Others apologized for never fully understanding her situation. One elderly uncle surprised her by saying something she would never forget. "Being generous is a wonderful quality," he said, "but people sometimes mistake generosity for weakness. You finally taught them the difference." Those words stayed with her long after the reunion ended. They perfectly summarized what had happened. Emma had not become cruel. She had not become selfish. She had simply stopped allowing herself to be used. As time passed, her life continued improving. Her business reached new levels of success. She hired additional employees and expanded into new markets. The company she had built through years of sacrifice became stronger than ever. Financially, she was thriving. More importantly, she felt emotionally healthier. She spent weekends traveling, exploring hobbies, and reconnecting with interests she had neglected for years. Without constant family crises consuming her energy, she finally had time to enjoy the life she had created. During this period, Emma also met someone special. His name was Daniel. They met through mutual friends at a charity event. Unlike many people she had encountered in the past, Daniel showed genuine interest in her as a person. He asked about her goals, her passions, and her experiences. He never asked about her income. He never hinted at financial expectations. He appreciated her intelligence, her kindness, and her determination. Their relationship developed slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. For perhaps the first time, Emma experienced what it felt like to be valued for who she was rather than what she could provide. Daniel quickly noticed how uncomfortable she became whenever conversations turned toward family. Instead of pressuring her for details, he listened patiently whenever she chose to share. His support helped her recognize how unhealthy many of her previous family dynamics had been. The contrast between genuine respect and years of emotional manipulation became increasingly clear. About a year after the Lobster dinner, something unexpected happened. Emma received a phone call from her father. Unlike previous conversations, his voice sounded different. He seemed nervous. After exchanging brief greetings, he asked if they could meet privately. Curious, Emma agreed. A few days later, they sat together at a quiet cafe. For several minutes, neither of them said much. Then her father took a deep breath and looked directly at her. "I owe you an apology," he said. Emma was so surprised she almost thought she had misheard him. Her father continued speaking. He admitted that he had spent years avoiding difficult conversations because it was easier than confronting problems. He admitted that he often remained silent when he should have defended her. Most importantly, he admitted that the family had taken her generosity for granted. "I should have stopped it years ago," he said quietly, "and I didn't." Tears filled Emma's eyes. This was not a perfect apology. It did not erase the pain of the past, yet it was honest. For the first time, her father was acknowledging what had happened instead of pretending nothing was wrong. They talked for nearly 2 hours. Some topics remained difficult. Some wounds had not fully healed. But when they parted ways, Emma felt lighter. She finally received something she had wanted for years: recognition of the truth. Her relationship with her father improved gradually after that conversation. Trust was rebuilt slowly, one interaction at a time. Her mother, however, struggled more. She continued believing Emma should prioritize family obligations above personal boundaries. Although their relationship became civil, it never fully returned to what it once was. Emma accepted this reality. Not every relationship could be repaired. Ryan remained the most difficult challenge. He still blamed Emma for many of his problems. He insisted that she could have made life easier if she had simply continued helping. Every so often he attempted to guilt her into providing financial assistance. Emma consistently refused. Over time, their contact became limited. While she wished him well, she no longer felt responsible for fixing his mistakes. Surprisingly, this distance proved beneficial. Without Emma constantly rescuing him, Ryan slowly began taking greater responsibility for his own decisions. The process was messy and often frustrating, but it was necessary. Years later, Emma would realize that refusing to help him had actually forced him to mature in ways endless financial support never could. As another year passed, Emma reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who sat alone in a restaurant staring at a $4,000 lobster bill felt like a different person. Back then, she believed her value came from what she could give others. She measured her worth through sacrifice. She thought love had to be earned through endless generosity. Now she understood something far more important. Real love does not require constant payment. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, not obligation. Family should support one another, but support should never become exploitation. On the second anniversary of her father's birthday dinner, Emma decided to do something symbolic. She made a reservation at the same luxury seafood restaurant where everything had begun. This time she was not organizing a family celebration. Instead, she invited a small group of people who had consistently supported her. Daniel joined her. So did two close friends who had stood beside her during the difficult months after the betrayal. They laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed a wonderful evening together. The atmosphere felt completely different from the night that had changed her life. There was no manipulation, no expectations, no hidden agendas. Everyone contributed equally. Everyone appreciated one another. At one point during dinner, Emma glanced around the table and smiled. She realized that family was not defined solely by blood. Family could also be the people who respected you, encouraged you, and cared about your well-being. As dessert arrived, Daniel raised his glass and offered a simple toast. "To new beginnings," he said. Everyone smiled and joined the toast. Emma looked out across the waterfront where the city lights reflected against the water. The same restaurant that once represented betrayal now represented something entirely different. It represented growth, strength, freedom. The sweet revenge she had imagined after the lobster dinner was never about humiliating her family or making them suffer. True revenge turned out to be much simpler. It was building a life so peaceful and fulfilling that she no longer needed anyone's approval. It was refusing to allow guilt to control her decisions. It was learning to value herself enough to establish boundaries. Most of all, it was discovering happiness after years of being taken for granted. As the evening came to an end, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude. Not gratitude for the betrayal itself, but gratitude for the lessons it taught her. The lobster dinner had exposed painful truths. The wedding disaster had forced difficult changes. The years that followed had transformed her life. Looking back, she finally understood that losing the role of family ATM was not a loss at all. It was the beginning of her freedom. And as she left the restaurant surrounded by people who genuinely cared about her, Emma knew she had achieved something far more valuable than revenge. She had found peace, self-respect, and a future that belonged entirely to her.